I need a special guest for the next episode of GameBird Weekly, so I'm gonna really elevate it. Thinking, brainstorming. I've got it. Andres Restart. Andres, buddy, old pal, how you doing? Hear me out. Switch 2, predictions, power, performance, launch lineup, what do you say? Alrighty then. This is gonna be the greatest GameBird Weekly episode ever. What is up, guys, and welcome back to GameBird Weekly. We've got a super special show for you today. The most exciting GameBird Weekly episode to date, episode number 6, and here's why. Number 1, we're doing a full-on Nintendo blowout. We're going to be discussing the Switch 2. We're going to be discussing our predictions. We're going to talk about the leaks, the rumors, what our expectations are, what we think that launch lineup might look like, that and so much more. And 2, we have an absolute legend on the show today. A legend we're going to introduce in just a moment. But first, I would like to introduce my co-host, Colin, from Any Games Necessary. Colin, what's up, my man?
Not much. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Super excited to talk some Nintendo goodness today with you guys.
Sweet.
All right. And next up, a man who probably needs no further introduction, my good friend and my favorite Nintendo YouTuber, and that is Andres Restart. What is up, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, man. And that was some very high praise. I appreciate it. I'm honored. But yeah, I'm ready to talk Nintendo with you guys.
Hell yeah, dude. I'm sure for those of you guys who don't know, Andres, he has a channel. It'll be linked down below, as well as Colin. But he does so much Nintendo content, speculation, theories, impressions, reactions, all sorts of goodness. He pumps out videos daily like a machine. He is a Nintendo machine. Colin, he's doing short form reviews as well as a lot of top 10s. He won't be just focused on Nintendo, instead covering games across the industry from Nintendo to Microsoft to PlayStation. So make sure you check him out as well. Help him grow. He's brand new to the platform, and he's got a review up, a YouTube short review of Super Mario RPG for the Nintendo Switch. So go ahead and check that out. But yeah, super exciting. Andres, I've been on your channel many times over the years, and it's been so much fun. So it's super cool to finally have you here at GameBird Classic and on the new podcast that we started.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it, man. I'm glad you're back up. You got this thing going on with the podcast and videos. It's been cool.
Thank you. But with introductions out of the way, what do you guys say we start our first topic?
Sounds good.
Bring it on. So let's talk about some of those Switch 2 leaks, rumors, a lot of the information that's been kind of circulating over the internet over, how long? Well, it's really ramped up over the last few weeks, I feel like. But there's been speculation all throughout 2023 leading into this new year. But we've seen a lot of stuff from price range landing at $400. We've seen stuff about 2 SKUs, one that's digital only, that's $400, one that has physical media, that's going to be $450. We've seen stuff about an 8-inch screen. We've seen stuff about DLSS. We've seen things from it might have a dual screen technology. We've seen all sorts of stuff. So I want to talk to you guys based on some of the leaks and rumors that you guys have heard about or you guys have researched. Do you find any of these recent stories to have credibility? Do you think it's just all rumor that's circulating? What do you guys think? Whoever wants to start.
So I think there's a lot there. There's been a lot of different things that have come up over the last few months from different sources, different places, varying levels of credibility. It's possible that even some of this stuff we've heard about was still under flux, right? So even if it was coming from like a valid place, perhaps a change could have occurred, right? So I think regardless, we got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, you know? But I will say, just on the specs perspective, right? There was some stuff that came out from this Taiwan publication, and I haven't done the full research on it yet, but I've actually seen some other publications that have been more consistent with this kind of information, like Universal Nintendo, actually argue against the specs that are being reported here. And kind of the story, right, that's been like going today is that like that Switch 2 has like specs that are worse than what we thought. But Universal Nintendo's arguing otherwise, and Universal Nintendo's been pretty reliable over the last year or so when it comes to like Nintendo information, if not longer, but just like with all this Switch 2 conversation. So I'm just saying, I don't think we should be doom and gloom about Switch 2 specs. I actually think we should be pretty optimistic on it, right? Like when I consider some of the more reputable reports out there, how there was a tech demo. It wasn't running on hardware; it was just hypothetical specs, right? But you know, that's kind of like what they're aiming for. And so there were two different tech demos.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I was going to ask if you were referring to the Matrix and the.
Yep. I am.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I am. So yeah, one of them is the Matrix Unreal Engine 5 demo, and so we've actually gotten a few updates over time about that one. And so what we've heard from that one, I mean, it's hypothetically the Switch 2 can run that same tech demo. So if you Google the Matrix Unreal Engine 5 tech demo, you will see that came out to showcase the next generation platforms that are now current gen PS5 and Xbox Series. But what's interesting is that we've heard from Nate the Hate, for example, who's considered to be pretty reliable, that the ray tracing that was seen in that tech demo is actually, it seems more impressive, or at least on par with PS5. Now, it doesn't mean that Switch 2 is as powerful as PS5, but at least from a ray tracing perspective, which is a simulation of real-time lighting effects, it's pretty good. And a lot of that has to do with NVIDIA's technology, the DLSS, the deep learning super sampling, which is basically artificial intelligence, and it does different things. Like it can improve latency, it can improve frame rate, it can improve resolution. And with one of the more modern versions of DLSS, that includes ray tracing as well. And so we've seen the old version of the tech demo. We haven't seen the Switch 2 version, right? That's behind closed doors, but that's what we've heard it can do. And then there's this other tech demo, supposedly, of Breath of the Wild. We all know Breath of the Wild, and I'm sure a lot of us have seen like those CMU, like emulated versions of Breath of the Wild that run at 4K at 60 or 120 FPS. Well, this tech demo apparently ran Breath of the Wild, not at the 900p it's running at on Switch, but at 4K at 60 frames per second, so not the 30, completely fluid, and instantaneous loading. So when you boot up the game, there's a few significant moments of loading that take place that was not discernible supposedly in this tech demo. And so that suggests even more cool things. Not just that Switch 2 will have DLSS and it could have, you know, better frame rate, better resolution, and better ray tracing, but also fast loading. And so that kind of it possibly implies that the Switch 2 is going to have a solid state drive, very similar to PS5 and the Xbox Series. And what's cool about that is that all these the solid state drive has multiple applications in terms of how it improves the overall gaming experience. It's not just storage of space, but it's how they utilize that, right? That can be used to just make things snappier. When it comes to actual games, they load in faster. This can have huge implications for open world games, for example. So imagine like, you know, you're playing the game and you don't notice that pop in, right? So like when you're exploring a world and something just kind of pops in, like it happens more naturally. You can see further off into the distance. And that's just basically quicker loading, right? So those are all exciting things. And I think that like we don't know what the actual raw power of the Switch 2 will be, right? But from everything I've heard, what my expectation is, what I've personally predicted, is that the Switch 2 is going to have an overall visual impact that's comparable to Xbox Series S. Now, that is a prediction. I do not know, right? But my ultimate thinking on that is just we're hearing about these different games that are going to be coming to Nintendo Switch 2, like Monster Hunter Wilds, Far Cry 7, and these are next generation games.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the Switch 2 is going to be getting next generation games like this, then I think that implies that the Switch 2 is going to be at least close to the benchmark of Xbox Series S. Now, Series S is like the cheaper version of the two different Xbox platforms, right? But next gen games still run on that platform, just like at 1440p as opposed to 4K. And so I think Switch 2 is going to be around that range, maybe not raw power wise, but when you account for all the bells and whistles, the NVIDIA tech, the DLSS, that's kind of what I think we might be looking at in terms of how it'll look to our eyes, the visual impact. And considering that it's a handheld device that will just have a home, a TV mode, a portable mode, I think that's pretty damn good. And what Nintendo could do with that, what Nintendo could do with the Nintendo Wii, that was impressive. So what they might be able to do with the Switch 2, if it has visuals like this, I'm ready to have my mind blown once Nintendo shows us that next 3D Mario game.
Yeah, I want to stay on power since you got into like the power. I want to stay on that for a little bit and discuss like our thoughts on that. You made some good points about it, but Colin, what do you think, man? What do you at least as far as like the power goes? What are your kind of expectations or hopes for that as in regards to the Switch 2?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Echo what Andres said. The DLSS will definitely help it bridge the gap that the other that it has with the other consoles. And yeah, I mean, the rumors I've heard, just like Andre said, the Xbox Series S Xbox Series S like comparable to it. I think that would be really cool. I mean, the main thing I want from the console as far as graphics, they don't have to be the best, but it does have to sell me on the idea that a third-party game would play just as well on my Switch 2. Because like right now it's like, you look at Mortal Kombat, Harry Potter, some of the games they've released in the last year, it's like it's not even feasible to like say that it runs just as well on the Switch. So I mean, that's really all I'm hoping for. I'm not the biggest graphics person in the world. I just want it to run like solidly.
Sure. Yeah, and I echoes Colin's sentiment. I'm not the biggest graphics person either. For me, the most important thing with hardware is the consoles. A console lives and dies by the software that it has. And again, that's why Nintendo is absolutely crushing with the Switch. When you look at the lineup, like even going into Switch 2, just look back at this console and the amount of like huge Nintendo experiences we've gotten, from Odyssey to Tears of the Kingdom to Pikmin 4 to Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3. Like epic experiences, phenomenal indie content, great third-party stuff, as well as like crossover IP stuff like the Mario Rabbids stuff. The software is unbelievable on the Switch. But like Colin said, I would like to see the Switch 2 at least run at a place of power that's able to have third-party software come to it without there being some major
compromise.
Yeah, like I don't want third-party games packaged with an apology. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you could play it on this hardware, but we're sorry it runs.
Like, I don't want, like as Colin was saying, like Hogwarts Legacy, right? Like I don't want to play Hogwarts Legacy and be like, what in the world is going on with their hair?
Yeah,
and so that to me, that's like, it just looks off. Or like still on Hogwarts Legacy, like Hogwarts Legacy on Switch, a lot of people have been enjoying the game, but I don't want to say it's not an enjoyable version, but it becomes like almost a different game because you have to like press a button to load into different areas that you don't have to on the more powerful systems. And so things like that are problematic to me, right? Or we go back to some older ports like Wolfenstein 2, for example, or Doom. They're considered to be quality ports, and I did enjoy those games, but there was a little bit of a blurriness issue, kind of looked a little fuzzy. And
they kind of look like they have like Vaseline smudged on the screen a little bit.
I just kind of hope that things look a little bit sharper, a little bit clearer. I'm not saying that the games have to look exactly as good, but I want to be able to play the game and not have to squint my eyes or be like, what in the world's going on? And so that takes away a little bit from my personal immersion, right?
Sure.
And I think, I mean, Switch 2 is not going to be more powerful than the PS5 or a Series
Right.
X, but can it be close enough to the point where most people will play it and be like, "Oh, this is fine."
Yeah.
Like think back to like the early 2000s, like PS2, GameCube, Xbox. Technically, GameCube and Xbox were a lot more powerful than PS2.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
there were still a whole bunch of games on PS2, and when we played it back in the day, we weren't like, "Man, this PS2 version looks like trash." No, we were just like, "All right, it's on PS2. Cool." Right?
Yeah.
So like that's kind of what I hope Switch can be
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, there was early talks. I don't know if you remember this one, Andres or Colin, if you heard about this anywhere, but before people were comparing the supposed power of the Switch 2 to a Series S, there was comparisons to a base level PS4. Do you remember that at all?
Yes.
And there was a lot of people putting out content on YouTube saying like, this is terrible news. This is horrible. They're going to start out their next gen, a gen behind everyone else. And I was the opposite. I was like a new Switch that runs games like PS4. That's a hybrid. To me, that sounds phenomenal. And the proof is in the pudding, because when you look at games like Ghost of Tsushima, like it's still one of the prettiest games to date. It's a last gen game that pushed and the PS4 looked beautiful. It was gorgeous. That game holds up today. No one looks at that game and goes, this looks so dated. It's beautiful. And a lot of the first 2 years of PS5, guess what? They like God of War, Ragnarok. That's a PS4 game that's ported up. Look at what's the other one? Horizon, right? Or was Horizon exclusive to PS5? I think it was both.
Zero Dawn or
Yeah.
The new one. The new one. The second one.
Horizon Forbidden West.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a PS4 as well. I can fact check this right now. But keep going.
Not much of a Sony guy, but I will say that I have a PS4 and I am currently playing games on it. Actually in the middle of Monster Hunter World. So, but I mean, I played it. I'm like, hey, this is a pretty game still.
Yeah.
I'll say that because earlier I was talking about a prediction of the visual impact being around Series S level, but I tried to note that that's the only thing the raw power would be. If the raw power is like PS4, but you factor in DLSS and things of that nature, and I mean I think that's conceivable, right? Like maybe Switch 2 has a raw power that's comparable to a PS4, but when you apply all those features and things and just modern tech and processing techniques and all of that, right? Like and it the visual impact that gets to like Series S level, right? So
Right.
I think that would be amazing, actually. So if you tell me Switch 2 has a raw power, if it has the same teraflops as a PS4, I'll be like, well, I mean, I can hold it in my hand, right?
Yep.
And it can do extra little things. Like I think that would be pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Sorry.
No, you're good. Like I said, Ghost of Tsushima is a great example. Last of Us 2 is another one. Like, when was the last time someone complained about the visuals on The Last of Us 2? Like, a PS4 rocks in the visual department still. We're not even at the point where PS5 and Xbox Series X are actually taking advantage of the hardware. There was a lot of missed promises. So I am not worried about the power of the Switch. And again, even at the base power, like you said, assuming it's the base power of a PS4, it's supercharged by DLSS, you're going to get a great third-party experience on that console. And then you think about, well, look at what Nintendo does with their underpowered consoles with game development. Look at like what they did with Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch, or what a Prime 4 might look like. Nintendo, they're wizards with their own hardware. They do the unimaginable on their consoles, on their inferior consoles. So to me, that's exciting stuff. But let's move on from. Oh yeah.
It's important to note the Xbox One X has more power than the Series S, but they've been able to do better things with it, and I think Nintendo can do the same with less power with the DLSS.
Modern tech, I mean, the modern tech has better tool sets and features. Like there's exactly like so. I think we should we should be optimistic on what we're going to get with this.
Totally. So I want to move on from the power discussion and talk a little bit about, well, this is probably my biggest hope for Switch 2, but it's also been something that's been kind of circulated within rumors and leaks, and that is backwards compatibility. If there's like one thing that I could say I really want for Switch 2, it's backwards compatibility. I think being able to have the entire Switch library or your entire Switch library on Switch 2 hardware from the get-go would be massive. It's awesome. And I know Microsoft has really crushed it in the backwards compatibility area. Sony, not so much. I mean, PS5 is backwards compatible, which is really cool. It really sucked when their consoles weren't. It stung a little bit with Nintendo when we've made complete form factor changes and media changes that have led to it no longer being backwards compatible. But what do you guys think about that? Do you guys think this is something? I'll jump out and say I do think we're going to have a backwards compatible console. But I want to ask you guys, do you think we're going to get something backwards compatible? And is that something that you really care about, or is it a take it or leave it type thing?
Yeah, I think we probably will. I mean, if the rumors are true, this one's going to be more iterative rather than like a complete revolution in the way that the Switch is going to be. So I could see maybe them ditching the carts, but I could see them having a little opening for them, like they did with the what was it, the DS and the Game Boy Advance carts. So I could definitely see them doing that. I think this Nintendo I think this form of Nintendo knows that backwards compatibility is definitely really important. And if they want to sell like their old Switch games, they're going to need to include something on this new iteration.
What about you, Andres?
I mean, I'm in total agreement. I expect full backwards compatibility. Like I don't think there's going to be any concessions. Obviously I don't know, right? That's just my prediction, but
sure.
I mean, I think there's a lot of reason to expect it. As Colin pointed out, this is good. Well, from everything we've heard, this is going to be an iterative system, right? It's going to be a Switch 2. Maybe that's not what they call the name, but it's going to be a follow-up, right? And you just look at the history of Nintendo, especially with their handhelds, they go at least one generation back. And so I think that's probably the safe expectation. And there's other reasons beyond just that history, right? Like now that they have Pokemon on the platform, typically Pokemon Company does not make their Pokemon games immediately for the current gen platform. They wait a year or two, but you still want to have that to be playable on the new system. And so that's another reason why you want to have backwards compatibility, right? But
Sure.
with the large audience that is on Switch, Nintendo's going to want to do their best to bring that audience over. And so if you don't have backwards compatibility, you lose that large library, right? And Nintendo's already been on the record talking about how they want accounts to transfer over and things of that nature.
Sure.
And so they've already discussed some level of a backwards compatibility, right? And so like when I say full backwards compatibility, I'm thinking, yeah, you take your cartridge, you put it in, right? But I'm also thinking you log into your Nintendo account, go to the eShop, re-download the game you had downloaded on your Switch, play it on your Switch 2, and you bring over your cloud save data, right? Or you can transfer over your save data, even if it wasn't on the cloud save, in the case for like Animal Crossing or Splatoon, and you can play the same game. It's uninterrupted. It's basically, if you get a second Switch, right? Like I don't know, for anyone who's gotten like a second Switch, you can transfer over everything to that second Switch. Same deal. That's my expectation. And there's actually a rumor out there right now from Nash Weedle. Now, I haven't seen anything to discount anything that Nash Weedle has said, right? And there have been some things they've said that have come true. So, every time I bring them up, I always encourage people to say, hey, listen, I know some people doubt their sources, but no one has ever provided any evidence that says that they're wrong. We just haven't seen everything that they said be confirmed yet, right? But there were some things they had that have been confirmed, like the Metroid Dread stuff, for example, or even recently they teased like 3 announcements for Nintendo the day of the Game Awards, and that's when we got the 3 N64 games for NSO, which they have not announced in that way before. So there's some little things, and so a recent rumor from them is that there's going to be a Bayonetta 3 or a Bayonetta collection enhanced on Nintendo Switch 2. And part of that rumor, and there's obviously room for interpretation here because they're a Spanish speaker, and so there could be something lost in translation, but it almost sounded like they were hinting at or implying that there is a level of enhanced backwards compatibility. And so while I expect backwards compatibility, I'm almost thinking that you might be able to take, say, I don't know, like Mario Odyssey that has like a dynamic resolution. You put it into your Switch 2, and it'll just run the game a little bit better. Like, because if it's a dynamic resolution or if it's an unstable frame rate, it'll hit closer to that high range target as opposed to dipping down more often because it's just a weaker system. Almost like, for example, if you played like Pokemon on the 3DS, and then you brought it over to the new 3DS and you noticed that the battles weren't lagging anymore, kind of like that. So that's kind of my expectation.
Sure.
We can go into why, but yeah, I expect backwards compatibility. I think it's gonna be a big deal.
Well, I got a weird question for you guys. It's a fun one. I don't know if this is something that anyone has discussed, and it's probably not like the most exciting question, but rumors have suggested that there are going to be two models: a physical media model and a digital only model. And as all of us know, with each gen, we're getting closer and closer to a digital only future. It's always been really hard for me to imagine Nintendo making that jump first to digital only. But let's just entertain for a second that Nintendo is looking to be the first and does see the trend going that way. What if the two SKUs was a digital only model or a physical model, but the physical model works in that you can put Switch physical media into it. It has a cartridge slot. So it's almost like, yes, you could have digital backwards compatibility on that digital model, but the other one has the slot for your games. You're paying a little bit more for physical media. It's basically essentially, not to cut you off, but I just want to say it's essentially what Sony did, with PS5.
So, I mean, the only time I can think of in, the history of Nintendo that they've done two SKUs was the Wii U, and we know how that turned out. I mean, I'm not sure that they're wanting to go back to that type of model. And I do like the $400 price point. It comes in under the Steam Deck, which I think is like, they still want to be one of the most affordable consoles on the market. And I think Nintendo's not really the type of company that likes to muddy the waters and do two SKUs on release. I could see them doing a digital only model in the future, kind of like they did the handheld only model and like the 3DS. But I think they're going to try to make it as simple as possible, for people to figure out which SKU they're buying. So I think just one SKU on release is what I think they're going to do. You actually make a really good point. I'm trying to think, and Andres, can you think of, other than the Wii U at launch, two different SKUs for a mainline Nintendo console? Because I can't think of any. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think they have done that.
So, yeah, my thinking on this is a little divided, right? I'm not saying that the rumor's false, right? I think it was coming from Special Nick on the Xbox Era podcast, and I think that's a good place. That's a good place, right? But that doesn't also, they'll even tell you that just because they heard it doesn't mean it's going to come true.
Sure.
Right? And so, it may have been something considered, right? And maybe it does end up being the case, but when I kind of break it down, I'm not certain, right? I will say, right, Colin, you bring up how Nintendo may not want to go back to what the mistakes they made with the Wii U, and I think there's definitely truth in that, but also, I'm not sure that the two versions is why the Wii U failed, right? I think the Wii U failed for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
And so, I wouldn't say that that's the reason why they shouldn't have two versions, right? But it is something to consider because I think part of the issues with the Wii U is marketing, messaging. And so if you have two different versions at launch, that can get a little confusing. But something else I kind of think about is just how do they handle pricing here, right? Because I think we seem to all be in agreement that $400, like I've been thinking $400 for like over a year. Like that seems to be right. If you account for inflation, it's actually not even that much more expensive than what the Switch was at back in the day. It's always been $300, but when you account for inflation, like that's kind of like a comparable number now. And so like, what are they going to price the Switch OLED at, right? Where are they going to price the Switch Lite at? I think the Switch Lite might be phased out, but they maybe have a replacement for that, right? And so the OLED might get a price drop. But how much are they going to drop the price of the OLED? It's $350 currently. We're talking about USD, American dollars, right? So if the Switch 2 ends up being $400, and that's like the version that has the carts, right? And so you would assume that the digital only version is slightly cheaper. What do? Do they make the Switch OLED $300, the digital only Switch to $350, and then the Switch with carts $400? That $50 gap seems a little messy to me. And if you're gonna have like a Switch Lite OLED, which is I'm predicting they're gonna release like a cheaper Switch Lite or something down the road, and then you have the Switch OLED, which has been dropped in price, then 2 different versions of the Switch. That's 4 different things that they're marketing, right? Obviously, we're making some assumptions here, but that just feels like a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused on how they might handle the messaging, right? So I'm not saying it can't happen. But I am inclined to side with Colin that maybe down the road when they're ready to phase out maybe the OLED, they introduce this version in there, and that's how they handle it. On the flip side, though, right, considering the other perspective, this might be a good way for Nintendo to put out a cheaper price. Because while $400, when you account for inflation, is only a little bit more expensive than what the Switch was back in 2017, but it's still $400.
Yeah.
That still seems like a lot for a Nintendo system, right? And so maybe they do want to try and find a way to hit that $300 price tag. And how do they do that? They make a digital-only version. And maybe it's not a disc, right? So it's not as expensive to just put in like a cartridge reader. But what happens if it's digital-only, then you only buy games digitally on that system. And what happens there is that you cut out the middleman. And so Nintendo makes a lot more money when you buy games digitally than physically. And so while they lose a little bit at launch because it will be cheaper, they'll probably make it back in software sales since they're cutting out the middleman there. And also that does slowly kind of accustom us to going full digital eventually, right? Maybe 7-10 years from now, because that is the direction we're headed in. Unfortunately, I don't like the sound of it. Maybe somehow we can retain physical in some way, shape, or form, but as time goes on, we get more and more digital, right? So I think it kind of goes both ways. I'm a bit divided on it. I've personally predicted that we're not going to get that, but it could still totally happen. Like, I'm not like convinced either.
Yeah, I'm leaning in the same side as you guys. I think it makes more sense for them to have one SKU at launch and then release a new SKU down the road. I mean, they've had great success with it. When you look at, like you mentioned, you look at the Switch, from the Switch to the Switch Lite, or the DS to the DS XL and the DS Lite and 3DS. Like, they've done it many, many times to great success. It's a working formula for them. I don't know why they'd stop doing that for the dual launch to, like you said, Colin, kind of muddy the waters and cause confusion at launch.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and like, that's something that Nintendo, at least with the Wii U, since you brought that one up, they experienced some of the bad muddying the waters with the naming, the look of the console, and other multiple SKUs, other things. But
yeah. I just imagine being like little Johnny or Susie on Christmas morning this year, and you find out that your parents got you the digital only, and your old Switch games don't work on the console.
Yeah.
I just don't. Nintendo tends to treat its audience with kid gloves, and I think it wouldn't be a solid move for them personally in the short run. Maybe in the long run, like Andre said, they make more money off the digital games. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what if they? I just have a strong doubt that they would do this. But what if they offered a kind of like an alternative where they went all digital, but if you have a cartridge and you can prove it, you get one download of that game onto that specific Nintendo account. Like, so if once a game is registered for that Nintendo account, that account can download that game once. And so even if you only had it physically, you could still download it. I guess the issue with that is how do they ensure that no one else uses that same cartridge to then download it again themselves for a separate account?
Yeah,
So I'm not sure there's a way to guarantee that, so maybe it doesn't happen. But if they could, that would be a nice alternative.
Yeah, they could do the PS5 Slim style thing where there's like a cutout area, like kind of like the GameCube had for the Game Boy Advance slot.
You could just buy it and add on.
Attach it.
Yeah, that could be. That could be maybe what the rumors coming from. The extra $50 is to buy that thing separately. I don't know.
Maybe.
All right.
Maybe what if like the dock is where you put in the cartridges, right? And so maybe you can buy a Switch 2 without the dock. And so when it's just without the dock, it's digital only. But once plugged into the dock, it can take cartridges.
Well, this leads right into the next thing I'd like to talk about as far as Switch 2, and that's form factor. So let's kind of segue into that, because a lot of people, like you mentioned earlier in the podcast, Colin, a lot of people are speculating that it's going to be a more iterative console. It's going to, build up on the Switch, but essentially be the same kind of device. What do you guys expect from that area? Do you feel like this is just going to look like a more sleek Nintendo Switch? Are you expecting... I think it's safe to assume they're going to stick with the hybrid nature. Like, they've struck fire. Yes, it didn't work with the Wii U, but there was a number of reasons with that. Bad branding. Bad messaging on release, only showing a controller. People not even knowing that it was a new console. They made the console look... from the front, almost identical to a Wii, except it had the rounded edges and it was longer in the back. What are you guys expecting form factor wise from this next console?
Super Famicom buttons.
I want that. Yes.
Yeah.
Amen to that. Yeah, it's on the logo. It's Colin and I have talked about this a few times, not to jump off topic, but we missed the days of the N64 when Nintendo would get really crazy with the colors and stuff and the controllers. And we wish there was more vibrant and fun Pro controllers for the Switch, because it's usually just the grips, maybe a little design on the controller, but like having like the full on multicolored controllers and stuff like that. I want colored buttons. I'm sick of gray and black. Make it fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's a theory that's been going on lately, because there's been like 5 different games, or maybe 6, that have popped up that use like this UI that has the colored buttons. And what's weird about that, and if you don't count 2023 or 2024, there hasn't been a single game in the entire massive Switch library that's used anything outside of like the basic white or gray to represent the buttons. And the thing about UI is that devs are very intentional about this, right? Like it's about, like the player understanding what to press. And so if you start using red when the buttons are gray, that's weird, unless this is like a small little like leak artifact of the transition that's happening behind the scenes. It's hard to guarantee for certain. But when I look at something like Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, right, which looks like a remake, that game looks awesome. Mm-hmm. But that's a remake of a GameCube game, and so they don't put the GameCube buttons, they don't put the Switch buttons. And when I look at all of their remasters and remakes on Switch, they don't match the old games. They just match the standard game buttons of the current Switch, right? So it's just kind of weird that we're seeing some games like this. But when I think about it, though, if the Switch 2 is iterative, then it does make sense to have those buttons. Because when did we get the Super Famicom buttons? When it was the Super Famicom to the Famicom, right? The Japanese version of the Super Nintendo. Or also when we had it for the new 3DS, which was kind of iterative upon the 3DS, right? Not a true sequel, but it was a revision. And so I kind of think that they might do that, and I am like, just me thinking on it, right? Like how it might look. I don't think it's going to look cartoony. I think they're going to find a way to make it look sleek. Like maybe it's almost like it's there, but it's almost like a white transparent gloss, not white, a clear transparent gloss. And so like there's like a subtle redness, a subtle yellowness, but not like blatant, which I think might look cool. But obviously that's just me like spitballing how they might apply it.
They can make it look really sleek and modern and still have those fun colors and be pretty. Yeah. I've got my Switch right here in a Nitro. It's not the Super Famicom, but I got the Nitro deck. My Switch is in here, and it's the regular SNES. It's probably a little blurry, but you can't tell. The purple looks really nice in person. You know, it's not tacky.
I have the GameCube one. It looks really cool. I'd show it, but I don't have it right here with me. But yeah, I agree. Super Famicom colors would be really cool. A few things form factor wise that I want is I want a freaking charging port on the top, please. Like when I'm traveling and like it's plugged in, it is so annoying having it like under me. And then they did the exact opposite where I would want like the headphone jack. The headphone jack's on the top. And so like it's like wrapped around the back of it while I'm trying. I don't know. I'd like the headphone jack on the bottom so I could just plug right in. But those are two things that I would really want. I don't really use the Joy-Cons because I don't like the Joy-Cons. I think they're terrible. But like if they could make them better, that would be cool.
So,
Procons.
I got this is a control, the QRD Stellar Joy-Cons, right? And so these are kind of big, right? So they wouldn't be great for portability. Maybe you could streamline this idea, but like these are Joy-Cons technically, right?
Sure.
But they got some nice grips to them, and when you put them on this little thing, right, it feels like a Pro controller. And so like I actually really like how this looks and feels. I think this is pretty good. Now, again, it's a little bit big for being on the console itself, but if Nintendo can maybe find like a happy middle ground there, like maybe just put like some subtle, nice, curvy grooves on the Joy-Cons, I think they can make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think that's probably going to be the biggest or the second biggest visual difference between Switch and Switch 2. I do think we are going to get some sort of, as I've dubbed, Procon standard that really evolves the grip to be something a little bit more, I don't want to say, more ergonomic. I was going to say adult, but something more ergonomic that's comfortable, looks a little bit more mature, but still works with like the fun with the fun colors. Makes it look a little bit more expensive. But I also think, I don't know, I'm still stuck on this, and I'm not 100% predicting this. We went over this in your podcast. I still think that a possible sell for Switch 2 could be some sort of dual screen component. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a clamshell design or a super tall screen that's super awkward. But if there is a way for, let's say it has a dock and the dock connects your Switch to the TV, when you're docked, you're seeing no latency, kind of like how the PlayStation Portal has next to no latency. You're seeing your game, but you have the special features when you're playing docked on your screen. I still think it's a possibility. It's really hard for me to imagine, especially with Nintendo Switch Online, and knowing that Nintendo wants to make that a seamless transition and carry over to the next hardware. They've released so many games for NES, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, for N64. They're going to run out at some point of games that at least people really want the service for. And so I can't imagine a dead end. I know that I think Dreamcast is a very strong option, even though I know Sega's announced new entries in a couple of Dreamcast games. 2 Dreamcast games, I think they announced they have new entries in. I think Dreamcast is a possibility, but to think that the Nintendo DS, their best-selling console of all time, with phenomenal software on it, and the 3DS with phenomenal software, that those are just lost to that console. I'd like to imagine that Nintendo's thinking about ways that they could bring those software over without compromising the core concept that made those games unique and work so well to begin with. And I could be wrong, but if there was some sort of tethering mechanic when the dock is plugged in, I don't know exactly how it would work, because obviously latency would be an issue. It also raises the concern of cost, but I think that some sort of dual screen form factor is a possibility. Even though I don't know if we've heard anything about it other than some patents that usually you can't take too much stock into those.
I think that's a cool idea. I mean, I personally loved playing what was it, the Zelda Wind Waker on the Wii U gamepad, having the maps and all that stuff. I think the critical failure of the Wii U, besides like the marketing and stuff, was making that only fun for the first player. So I think that they would have to rework the Pro controller in such a way, maybe make something like almost along the lines of like what the PS5 does with the pad, but make the pad like a video screen, like a la Dreamcast, something like that, where it's still large enough to where you can kind of use a Pro controller in such a way that it feels like it's fun for everyone playing and not just the first player. But I personally like that idea, and I do think that they need to figure out some way to get DS games besides doing these elaborate ports that they're doing with like Ghost Trick and they're doing a new Layton game. I know they've done they're doing the Trace Memories this year. So like, I don't think remaking every single gem from that console generation is even going to be possible. So I do agree with you that they need to figure out some way.
I think you already know my opinion on this.
I do.
I think it'd be cool, but it just doesn't seem practical.
Sure.
But I mean, I think maybe Colin might be on the right track though. If there is a way to like get this done, maybe just like a smaller kind of screen that you can touch with, and like suspending my disbelief, or rather just trying to solve the problem, right? Because I think if we were to do this, it impacts battery life.
Sure.
If there is like a Bluetooth tethering thing going on, the issue with that is that at least the way the Switch is handled, all the power is in the Switch itself. Right. And so if you're gonna run the game, when you dock it into the system, it's plugged into a power source, so it can afford to clock at higher speeds, and so you can have better visuals that represent the TV home console experience better. But if you're not plugged into the dock, that external power source, then that is no longer a good solution. So the question is it just a consistent level at all times, and it just scales, right? And maybe that's possible, right? Maybe that's just how it is, and the Switch is just more powerful that, even when you scale without clocking up in portable mode, it still works well. But then if you have two screens, that impacts power, right? And it is more expensive, and fitting in as much as you can. It just, there's all these challenges, right? That said, I do also kind of feel that it would be nice to eventually have a DS Virtual Console, a 3DS Virtual Console. Maybe buy a Wii U. I'm just kidding. But am I? I'm not sure.
I mean, maybe. They could do the sort of thing where, this is going to sound ridiculous, where they bring the DS and 3DS to Switch Online, and kind of like how they sell SNES controllers and 64 controllers, they sell a screen attachment that you could attach for the dual screen experience.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it wouldn't appeal to a large audience, but it would be something, right? That solution would exist. Something I think that would in theory work is if they're going back to like that PS5 controller idea where there's some sort of like touchpad or touch screen on there. I'm thinking not even like a screen, just because I'm thinking about cost, but maybe there is like a touchpad kind of thing.
Sure.
And so, I mean, we already have a touch screen on the Switch itself, right? Like, what if it's more like it's not as streamlined, it's not as nice, but if there's something you can touch and you can see how that represents on screen, they could just like say you're playing in TV mode, right? And you're playing with Pro Controller, and there's a pad in the middle. Whenever you touch the pad, you can see like a little dot that shows where your finger is on the bottom screen, and you just see both the bottom and top screen on your television. And then when you're in portable mode, you just touch the touchscreen right on the sides, and that represents the middle where you have the two different screens representing for the DS or 3DS. And so like that wouldn't be super elegant, but it would technically work.
Mimicking it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be kind of like not the same thing, but like same energy, kind of like when we play like 3D All Stars and we're playing Mario Galaxy and you want to emulate the pointer controls. You're using motion. It's not exactly the same. It's not as elegant, but it does work.
Right.
So maybe that, but you know, it would be cool. It would be cool if they get it to work.
All right. So before we move on to the next topic, I want to ask really quick. I think I know all of your guys' answers, but just for the sake of throwing it out there, when do you guys think that this will launch? The Switch 2, I'm going to raise my hand and just say 2024. I think it's going to be a late summer to holiday.
Yeah, about the same. Probably fall to holiday this year.
2027. I'm kidding. That's a joke. I think some people are predicting that.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. My prediction is like we get an announcement by March 31st, and the system comes out sometime in the summer. But I would like to point out, I mean the literal summer. So if you look at what the summer days are for this year, it's between June 20th and September 22. So if the system comes out September 21st, my prediction would still be right.
There you go.
Some people might look at that September month as technically fall, but you know.
I really want a September launch. Really, really, really bad. For two reasons. One is the obvious reason. I just want to Switch 2 and I want it now.
Right.
Two, my biggest fear, and I'm sure you guys kind of feel this a little bit. We know how it is when new hardware comes out. Scalpers galore, scalpers unite, and it's so stressful trying to lock in that pre-order. So I feel like if it is a summer one, you've got like two big pushes planned for getting hardware out of there. Nintendo's not going to want to go into a holiday. First off, I think they're going to bump up their numbers with the success of the Switch in general. So I'm sure there's going to be a good supply on that first run, but they're also going to plan for that holiday push as well.
No matter how much they get out there, they're going to sell out. This happens with all systems across all companies. Yeah. Like I like the idea of having multiple moments where we have shipments come in. Yeah. I mean, I also like the idea of having more than one game from Nintendo.
That too.
Right? Like build up a little bit of a lineup going in. And so, I mean, in my ideal world, it's not even September. It's like July or August, just so we can have like maybe 4 or 5 Nintendo games on Switch 2 already, you know, and then third-party stuff. But yeah, I kind of agree. You work out the kinks, like you get the word of mouth out there. You kind of position yourself to have the best possible holiday by coming out a few months sooner.
Yeah,
excellent.
I like the idea of tarring and feathering scalpers. So yeah.
that is also a valid strategy.
Yes.
Yes, we do condone that.
Okay.
On to the next topic, and that is games. What do you guys think is going to be the big launch game for Switch 2? And what kind of lineup do you guys expect or predict for, let's just call it Switch 2 year one?
So when we say year one, do we mean the first 12 months, 2024?
I'll just say, let's assume that it's coming out, just for the sake of this discussion, it's coming out. Let's just assume it's coming out late summer. We'll say the end of 2025. So.
Okay. So the first 18 months or.
Yeah, first 18 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sick.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a new 3D Mario. I think we can all get that one off the board. Metroid Prime 4, and then a new Mario Kart, hopefully. I mean, those are the obvious ones. I don't know if anyone has anything to add.
I think Pokemon. I think we're going to see a Pokemon. I know you mentioned, Andres, how they usually do the previous gen, but we have a few options with Pokemon right now. We have the possibility of a new entry. We have the possibility of a new Legends game, which I think is very likely. And we have the possibility of another remake. We have, two of the best Pokemon games, in my opinion, Black and White 2, haven't been remade yet. And that would be a huge fan favorite. I could see them actually doing a remake on the Switch and maybe a new Legends on the Switch too, since the Legends is your big, grand open world adventure. Obviously, with backwards compatibility, you'd be playing, or maybe a Switch 2 version of Black and White 2, if Black and White remake, if that's the case. But I think Pokemon within that first 18 months is very likely. What about you? You named the other ones that I was expecting. Maybe something Zelda related within the first 18 months. Obviously, this isn't a new mainline entry in the series, but Andres, I'll let you go because I'm sure you probably have something Zelda you want to mention as well as some other titles.
Oh, man. I mean, I agree with everything you guys have said already, right? Like, I kind of think the launch title, right? Like, because I assume 3D Mario is a holiday release. Like, I think October is like that sweet spot Nintendo's likes to put out Mario. And because of that, and because I think Switch 2 is coming out in the summer, those don't match up. And that's why I'm like, okay, well, if they're saving 3D Mario for holiday, which obviously is an assumption, right? And Switch 2 is coming out in the summer, which is also an assumption. What makes the most sense as a launch title then? And so I think the conversation we had, when we had my show and a couple podcasts, and have really helped me come to this idea. And I put out my predictions video yesterday. I think we're going to get 2 launch titles. One of them is Metroid Prime 4, right? I don't think there's a scenario where you have Metroid Prime 4 and say like 3D Mario on the same day or like a Zelda on the same day, because there's too much overlap there. Those are all big single player adventures, right? But can you have like a party game be like the other title? And that I think makes sense. Like you look back to when the Nintendo Wii came out, you had Twilight Princess, big single player adventure from Zelda, but you also had Excite Truck, which is a racing game. And then you also have Wii Sports, which is like a casual sports game, right? And so, like, those are all very different games. I don't think they took away from each other. I think they all complemented each other. And so, I think Nintendo might do something similar, right? So, I'm predicting Metroid Prime 4, cross-gen. There's still a fantastic running version on Switch. But I'm even going to say that the Switch version is $60. But I think there's going to be a lot of visually enhanced Switch 2 games, like Tears of the Kingdom, Splatoon 3. And so, you can buy those things. And those things may help to bolster the lineup a little bit, right? Maybe F-Zero GX Remastered comes out for Switch, but they have a Switch 2 version. But strictly going back to launch lineup, Prime 4, I think, comes out for Switch 2, but it's enhanced with, like, ray tracing, HDR, maybe 4K, and it's $70. This is a $70 version, right? So there's a pricing disparity there, right? So if you're not a fan of $70, well, you can just play it for Switch, right? And so there you go. And maybe there's even like a timed exclusivity. So because Twilight Princess came out like a month before the GameCube version, right? The Wii version came out before the GameCube version. And so in order to kind of excite the launch a little bit for Switch 2 with Prime 4, maybe Prime 4 comes out on Switch 2 like a week or two before it comes out on Switch. It's a little bit more expensive. And so that way it still comes out on Switch. You're not burning Switch owners. It's still a good version. It's $60, so like it's cheaper even. And so the Switch fan base that doesn't want to move on to Switch 2 is not disappointed. But you still have a better looking, better running version day one for Switch 2. And I feel like it's kind of like the best of both worlds. And then what I was alluding to earlier, another game. What that game might be, not sure. Maybe like a Switch Sports Resort or like a Nintendo Land 2, or let's say they call it Nintendo World, right? Like Nintendo Land, I think, is actually a really good like launch title, except there's this one prediction I've put out there, and I think this would be heavily tied into it, right? And this is just me thinking it's a really good idea. There's not like a lot of evidence to support this, but I kind of feel like they might bring back Street Pass, overhaul it for Switch 2, right? And then heavily integrate that into this other launch title that maybe is a Nintendo Land or a Switch Sports, And so that's the launch window, right? So you have 2 new Nintendo games, Prime 4. Let's just say Nintendo Land 2, just because that sounds cool, right? Even though it might be something completely different, but still cool. And then after that, yeah, 3D Mario. I think by the end of the fiscal year, March 2025, we get Mario Kart. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think Pokemon will still be on Switch. I love the idea of getting like a Legends exclusive. I think there might be something to that thinking. I'm not confident in predicting it, but I like the idea, and I'll at least say I think they're gonna have some Switch 2 enhanced patches or something like that, so we can still play a better looking, better running version of Pokemon on Switch 2. Beyond that, historically speaking, because you wanted me to give you something Zelda, right? Historically speaking, whenever Nintendo closes out a generation with a big Zelda game, for that next console, within that first year to a year and a half, there's another repurposed Zelda game, right? Like you look at Wind Waker HD, right? That came out early on for Wii U first year. But what did Nintendo close out the Wii with? Skyward Sword, right? Nintendo closed out the DS with Spirit Tracks. What did they open up the 3DS with in its first year? Ocarina of Time 3D. So I think they're going to do that again. Because you're right. We're too far. It's too far out for a brand new Zelda game, but it's not too far out for a remake. And so Aonuma, in multiple interviews, has said some things that are very choice, very interesting. One of which was the noting that that he doesn't think a lot of fans would know who Raru is, the character, not the town from Zelda 2, but the character. Even though they did a remaster for 3DS. And then even more recently, in another interview, he was straight up asked, "Are you going to remake Ocarina of Time?" And he said no comment. But what's extra interesting about this is that there was another interview that happened around the same time where he was asked about a Zelda Dungeon Maker, and he denied that. So if you're going to deny one thing and not deny another, and there's another interview that seems to support the idea, and there's this history of Zelda remakes happening.
Well,
I'm thinking that we're getting an Ocarina of Time remake. I don't know if Nintendo will announce it this year, but I'm going to predict we get it before the end of 2025. And I'm prepared to be wrong on that one, but man, I think that's going to be hype, and it would be the stuff of dreams.
Yeah, I mean, Colin and I had talked about this interview as well on a previous GameBird Weekly, and we had the same sentiment as you. Like, with that was a very his response to that question is so vague that Aonuma knows that his answer is gonna have people going crazy, and Nintendo's usually pretty quick to like squash stuff.
They like squashing stuff.
Yeah, like
they know how we are. They know. Yeah, how we are.
You give it
every time they make a direct announcement, like, "Hey guys, this is focused mostly on games just for spring."
Right.
Spring, right? Like they're not like, "Hey, we're gonna announce a whole bunch of cool stuff," right? Like they're not like PlayStation where they're just gonna put out a whole bunch of CGI trailers for games 2 years in advance, excluding Tears of the Kingdom. But so
Yeah, no, they're very purposeful with their messaging, and they're very careful to not let things go out of hand. So a no comment with a laugh, if I remember correctly, he chuckled and then said comment. Like that to me speaks volumes. And to be fair, and I like to throw this out there for sake of argument, even though I think Ocarina of Time makes the most sense, he could be chuckling or no commenting because there's another Zelda that they're planning to make a full remake of. Like that could be the funny part. I'm remaking
Twilight Princess. It looks like the tech demo.
Yeah, we have Link to the Past is another one. It's the most beloved 2D Zelda of all time. If they rebuilt that in a modern third person action adventure Zelda engine.
You're still talking about 3D Zelda, even though it would be a remake of a 2D Zelda.
It would be a remake of a 2D. Yeah, imagine remaking a Link.
Reimagining it into 3D.
Right. Think like how Square has reimagined Final Fantasy VII into, obviously that one was a 3D game already, but they've reimagined it. So I'm saying imagined a lot, but imagine them taking that beloved 2D entry and bringing it into the 3D Zelda space with modern hardware. So he could be laughing at that. I think Ocarina makes the most sense. But yeah, there's no way that there at least isn't some sliver of truth in that question for him to say no comment.
Yeah.
Like he could have even given us the typical, oh, we're not thinking about any other Zeldas at this time. Like he could have been like, we just wrapped up Tears of the Kingdom. We're not really thinking about remakes or remasters. We've started thinking about what's next for the series. You know what I mean?
Also, Anuma's like, he's one of us. And so when I say that, I mean like he knows what will excite us. Like there was back in 2018, there was a Zelda orchestrated concert, and infamously or famously, he said something along the lines of, "I know what you're thinking, Skyward Sword on the Switch," right? Like he said that to the huge Zelda fan base on the audience. Think back to 2018. You were like, "Oh,
yeah.
Switch just came out. Skyward Sword. Like we would love to see that." And so he teased that back in 2018. Nintendo shortly afterwards kind of said, "Nope, we're not doing it." But what happened?
Right.
2021, it did happen, right? So
right.
He has a record of teasing us, right? So maybe it's not Ocarina of Time. It's totally possible it's not Ocarina of Time, but I think it's clear that something has to happen along those lines. Strictly speaking, from the historical perspective, because we're not going to wait 5 years to satiate 3D Zelda fans. That's just not going to happen. Nintendo wouldn't do that. They're going to put something out there.
Right. And then I want to throw, before we move into the next topic, I just want to throw this one out. I know this is something you've talked about on your channel a handful of times. Colin, you might have an opinion or a prediction on this one as well, so I want to throw it out there. New Donkey Kong game. We just got Mario Wonder. I think it's a safe bet that a 3D Mario is in the pipeline, and I fully expect, if not a launch game, to be within the first... Oh, you can't hear me? Are we good? Cool. We got Mario Wonder, I was saying, and we all agree that a new 3D Mario game is, has been in the works and is probably coming to the Switch 2, if not as a launch game within that launch year of the hardware. But what about Donkey Kong? It's another beloved platformer. The last two Donkey Kong games that Retro made are phenomenal. Donkey Kong Country Returns and Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, both critically received really well. A lot of people consider Tropical Freeze one of the greatest 2D platformers ever made. It's a beloved series. We've got the cinematic universe. The Mario movie was super successful. I fully expect we're going to be getting some sort of Donkey Kong movie, Donkey Kong show. We know Seth Rogen played the character. I see them wanting to do more with that character. With that being in mind, I think it's a pretty safe bet that Donkey Kong is at least happening at some point, maybe within the launch year. Is that something that you guys think is likely, or are you on the fence about it?
I mean, we're getting that. We're getting Mario versus Donkey Kong. I'm just messing. Yeah, I do think that we could see a new Donkey Kong Country. I mean, whether it's a 2D or maybe they try 3D again for the series, yet to be determined. I'd personally love to see them try to do something like what they did with Donkey Kong 64, but maybe a bit better. I know fans of Donkey Kong 64 are going to kill me for that, but yeah, I'd love to see something 3D.
I mean, modern entry, right? It's been decades since then. Like, we figured out how to make 3D games a lot better since then, So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair expectation. And I agree with you guys. I think the time for Donkey Kong is coming, and I would actually argue that Mario vs. Donkey Kong, it doesn't take away from the chances of Donkey Kong. It adds to it, right?
Sure.
I think Nintendo actually looks at some of their lesser-known IP and thinks, okay, how can we help to get this to another level, right? And so look at what they did with Pikmin. They put Pikmin figurines all throughout the Nintendo World Park, right? They created a Pikmin mobile game. They put out Pikmin 3 Deluxe. And so these little things are kind of building up Pikmin, and they came out with Pikmin 4, best Pikmin game to date, right? They sat on it, they make sure it was really good, and it's not only is it quality perspective, like critically acclaimed perspective, best Pikmin game ever, sales-wise, hands down, best-selling Pikmin game ever, right? And so I think Nintendo wants to do something similar for other IP as well. And I think we're seeing some of that with Donkey Kong. You have Donkey Kong in the movie, the whole Seth Rogen stuff, like, yeah, you got that, right? But you have the Mario vs. Donkey Kong thing. You have the Donkey Kong expansion to Super Nintendo World coming out this spring, right? We're only like a couple months away from that. And so I think the idea here is to build up the Donkey Kong IP as well, the awareness for that brand. And so when they do come out with the Donkey Kong game, that I don't think will be too far off, right? Because you want these things to happen relatively close to each other. Yeah, I think it's happening, right? That we have the rumors, right? You know, so I don't know if it's a this year thing. I've predicted that I think it'll be announced this year, but I think by the end of 2025, there's a really darn good chance we've at least heard about Donkey Kong. Like, I think so. Whether it's 2D or 3D, that's a whole other conversation. All I feel confident saying is that it's going to be damn fun.
For sure.
Yep. Yeah, I could honestly, like, I was gonna say I could care less if it's a 2D or 3D version. Part of me feels like I'd prefer a 3D version, but the other part of me feels like Nintendo's been really innovative with their IP lately, and if they could innovate on a 2D Donkey Kong like they did with Mario Wonder, I am all for that. Make it weird, put some really neat ideas we've never seen in a 2D Donkey Kong before, and I am in. But with that being said, I want to move on to the final topic of the night, and that one is called You Wanna Get Nuts?
Let's get nuts.
And what this segment is it's going to be us just kind of going around and throwing out our wildest predictions. They don't have to, like, they can be crazy. You could go wild with this. We're not going to hold you accountable. We're not going to be like, dude, you were wrong. What was with that? No, these are where we have fun. So if someone wants to go first, or if you want to volunteer me, Colin, sounds like you've got one up your sleeve. Let's start at one at a time, and if you guys have more, we'll just rotate.
Okay, mine's sort of a 2-for-1, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so for some reason, we never got Super Mario Galaxy 2 in that pack, and it's super weird, the omission. I think Nintendo is going to announce a Super Mario Galaxy 2 port, but they're also going to announce alongside it, coming in the future, I think this character is too good to not have her own game. I think we are going to get a Rosalina's Galaxy, because I think the Galaxy series is too good to, like, not continue. And I think it's a perfect moment for Rosalina to shine as a character. You know, we saw the little star. What are the star things called? The Luma in the Mario movie. I think for sure. Well, I don't think for sure, but I think it would be really cool to get another iteration on the Galaxy games. And I think Rosalina being the star this time would be like a really cool spin and take, especially with Princess Peach coming out this year.
Yeah,
so.
no, I like that. I like that you brought up Princess Peach. Like, you know, if they can do it for Princess Peach, like, is Rosalina that much of a stretch? Like, Rosalina, I don't want to spoil anything, but Rosalina was involved with another Nintendo game during this generation. So that was related to Ubisoft, but I'll leave it at that. So yeah, no, I like that. That's cool.
I like that one too, and I agree. Rosalina's a phenomenal character. It would be really cool to see her have her own game, and like you said, Colin, letting her be the gateway to revisiting that kind of Galaxy type universe is a great way to where they can move forward with Mario with new ideas, but still take us back to that place we love so much.
All right.
All right, Andres, you want to throw one out there?
Oh man, like, I can go to town. Right?
Sure. Let's start with one, and then we could go wild for a bit.
All right. Oh man, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna give you two. All right. So one is, and this is not even honestly, I don't even think this is that crazy. I think it's a little crazy. I've entertained the idea already on my channel, but like, so we were already talking about Ocarina of Time remake, right? I think the idea with the remake would be to do something that doesn't require like the entire Zelda team, right? Maybe it's even outsourced to some overseeing. And so the idea of adding new content, a lot of new content is where it gets a little nuts. But I would love to see like Sheik playable, like extra Sheik missions in an Ocarina of Time remake, maybe a new dungeon, right, where the Light Temple is, maybe add some new combat mechanics. And so like that stuff would be like nuts, right? But then the other nuts thing I'm gonna say, like away from that, I want a new Star Fox game. I want it to be kind of like Starlink, where it's an open world, but it's the open space is the Lilat system, right? So maybe it's even smaller but more dense with like actual Star Fox towns and cities can go into, talk to people, interact with them. And what's cool about Starlink, like there's actually like battles going on, and if you play Star Fox 1 or if you play Star Fox 2, like there's a battle going on, and so like there's a little bit of a trying to manage resources and trying to win the battle in real time. And that kind of happens in Starlink as well, where there's forces that you have to manage and keep them down. And so what if they did that in an open space, open world format, kind of like Starlink, but full on Star Fox, right? And still give us that multiplayer dog match style, like all of that together. That would be the best Star Fox game.
Beautiful. I love that. And yes, I fully support that and want that from Star Fox. Nintendo's needs to really expand on what it means to be a Star Fox game and innovate that series a bit. You need to stop relying on the Star Fox 64 sort of formula. And I think, hey, on more modern, more powerful hardware, what better time to kind of reinvent Star Fox. I love the Star Fox world. I love those characters so much. I wish I really, really wish that Nintendo finds an opportunity to make that series a little bit more mainstream and less niche. And speaking of making series a little bit more mainstream, my prediction, I'm going to go for a twofer as well. I predict, and you actually kind of mentioned this, and the first one's a safe prediction, but the second part of it is wild. So just brace yourself for it. My prediction is that Nintendo will be making a port of F-Zero GX for the Switch 2. It's going to be beautiful visually. It's going to get more of that Metroid Prime Remaster treatment, where it's not just an upscale, but the game's going to look sleek, it's going to look fast, and it's going to have, new textures. It's going to look a lot better than your generic, up-res. But Nintendo will also at some point release a brand new F-Zero game or Captain Falcon game that innovates and takes the series in a brand new direction. And instead of it being a linear racer like traditional F-Zero games, it's going to be more like Forza Horizon, where it's this huge open world racing game in this cyberpunk kind of futuristic city, and they really go hard on Captain Falcon being a bounty hunter, and you'll have missions in the city, side missions, where your vehicle has like gadgets almost like a Batmobile, where you take down baddies and do missions like that. It's going to be a new era for Captain Falcon that brings him into the future as this really cool bounty hunter. And maybe there's some penultimate mission where he has to enter into this crazy Grand Prix for whatever super anime out story reason to save the day or whatever it is. But yeah, a Forza Horizon open world sci-fi racing extravaganza.
Let's go. I'm all for it. Right? Like I think he would still be entering Grand Prix and circuits. Like
yeah,
would be the races, but that's like those are like missions, right? Like to your point. And then,
yeah, like little really cool side missions,
but still having an open world like cyberpunk style city. And I'll throw this out there. I mean, this we're going nuts, right? So it's not just all driving. There will be moments where you can step on your car, right? Maybe you can do a Falcon punch,
the Batman combat.
Yeah. Right. Or like you go into a space bar, just like in GX when some of the cutscenes, you go into a space where you can talk to some people, do a little bit of negotiating, get some clues, investigate. Like it's almost kind of like Captain Falcon meets Cyberpunk meets Grand Theft Auto, kind of like.
Yeah, make it a little bit.
It would be the greatest game ever made. It would be the greatest game ever made.
They can make it a little bit like noir style, like Blade Runner, to where like you're driving and Captain Falcon starts narrating his thoughts, talking about like the crime syndicate and in the city and stuff.
Oh man, it would be really cool if there'd be some like secret like missions that you can access where he does do the narration, but you get like an insight into his personal life. It's like, oh man, I remember that one night with Jody or something, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
you get like a little bit of insight into his love life or his mysterious past.
Sure.
And maybe you get to learn like who his best friend is. Like, oh, you know what, Samurai Girl bothers me sometimes, but he's a cool dude to just have a drink with. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I love it. It'd be fun.
I hate you, Cameron. I literally had freewheeling bounty hunting F-Zero written down on my list where you're chasing Black Shadow. And yeah.
There you go. Great minds think alike.
It's gotta be real then.
But
I'll
go to my next one then. So I know Nintendo said that they really, did everything that they left on the chopping room floor for Breath of the Wild. They implemented in Tears of the Kingdom. I don't believe them. I think that they should take some of the ideas that they still have left over and make an open world Kid Icarus game, like kind of similar to Breath of the Wild, but more of like a God mode feeling game, where you're a bit more powerful, weapons aren't breaking, but like you can fly, you're doing like cool temples.
Greek monsters.
Yes.
That'd be really cool.
I think they could take what Ubisoft did with Immortal Phoenix Rising and just make it 10 times better. And I think that is absolutely the direction they should go with a Kid Icarus game, and I could see them doing that. I think it would be really cool.
Give it that Nintendo magic that, other games tend to lack. I love it.
It is interesting when you think about the Immortal game and Tears of the Kingdom. Like, if you merge them, you do kind of have like a modern Kid Icarus.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, when I look at that cover art for Tears of the Kingdom, it definitely gives me that aesthetic that I'd imagine for a new take on Kid Icarus.
You probably Photoshop that Link to look like Pit.
Yeah.
Like an adult Pit. You probably could. Yeah. Change the hair to brown, put some wings on there.
Yep. So yeah, that's my second or my last nuts prediction.
You got one more for us, Andres?
Can I pull something random?
Go wild, man.
I mean, I got it.
Let's hear it.
What's crazy is this was actually a project which is canceled. So Activision, there's a few people that kind of confirmed that this report was true. Activision at one point was developing a Donkey Kong game.
Interesting.
And Miyamoto was excited about it. It was going to be an open world 3D Donkey Kong game where he was sliding on tree branches and stuff, like Tarzan style. Like the Disney.
Oh, nice! Like grinding on them.
Like grinding on them. Except
that's cool.
Miyamoto felt that would hurt Donkey Kong's feet, so he recommended that he while sliding on the tree branches.
See, this is not to cut you off, but this is why I love Nintendo. We can't do that. That would hurt his feet. What if he slides on banana peels? That makes a lot more sense. This is why I love Nintendo. But go on. I don't mean to cut you off.
I mean, yeah, but it's funny that was a thought that Miyamoto had apparently.
Yeah.
So I think they should make an open world Donkey Kong game where he plays like Tarzan, but he punches like Donkey Kong would, like with a lot of force, and that would just be an amazing game.
Yeah.
That'd be so cool. I love it. You think about how people love like Spider-Man, for example, right?
Sure.
But imagine like Spider-Man, but Tarzan, but Donkey Kong, right? Like there's an open world jungle, right? You're gonna have some valleys and mountains and lakes and stuff, but you're gonna, instead of doing the web thing, it's like swinging on vines, sliding on branches, rolling, like coming down, and you're heavy because you're a gorilla, right? You roll in, you have like that kind of weighted momentum. Roll into something, punch it hard. Like they could make like a really unique 3D platformer doing this, and it would be really cool. Watch this actually be the Donkey Kong game. But I feel like it just seems like a dream scenario. So
I think that sounds cool. I picture like larger than life boss fights in just like massive monsters or characters or whatever. And like swinging grinding down a giant tusk like Legolas does in Lord of the Rings. I don't know. I just picture like some of the Shadow of the Colossus stuff in there.
Except the only difference is while Donkey Kong is not as big as them, he still has the strength of.
He's like Kratos' strength. Make him like Kratos.
Exactly. Right. He gets on their head. He finally gets on their head, and he just starts.
Yeah.
And it's like it feels like there's an earthquake on their face, and.
I just want the opening scene of like when Donkey Kong shows up. I want Guns N' Roses. Welcome to the Jungle playing.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
It's Diddy singing. I love it. All right, I've got one more prediction. This one isn't as wild. I went big with the first one. This one is, as far as like Nintendo relationships going, they've been working a lot and working very nicely with a lot of different companies, whether it's lending out their IP to make Hyrule Warriors or Age of Calamity or Mario and Rabbids. They've also recently brought us a remake of Super Mario RPG, an old school project with Square. The game reviewed really well. I'm not exactly sure a sales figure for the game. Andres, you might have a better idea on this than me, but I know as of today, because I was in the eShop, the game is still in the top 30 purchases of the eShop. So it's still selling really, really well. My prediction is that the success of Mario and the current relationship of Nintendo and Square has been really strong with Octopath and Triangle Strategy. I'm going to predict a Super Mario RPG 2 that's less miniature, less nostalgic as far as that goes, but has a new RPG type art style and an enhanced version of those JRPG mechanics. Tells a more modern story.
I'm all for it. Just bring back Gino and Mallow.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. I mean, I see your Super Mario RPG and I say, why not Zelda RPG?
I would love a turn-based Zelda spinoff.
They could make Gino part of that world too. I mean, he's not exactly, exclusive to the Mario world.
All right, I'm gonna one up that. That's stupid craziness. So Smash Brothers, HD 2D. So imagine a party system where you have the HD 2D style. You have Link, right? Kind of like how you're envisioning, right? You have Mario, Mallow, yes, Samus. I like Samus like powering up. I can kind of see like the HD 2D pixel art in my head of Samus powering up like a power like blast and just like slam it into like a Ridley Cerberus freak, and that'd be fun.
That's cool. I would love that as like some sort of like how they've done Mario 35 and Tetris 99, where they do a really cool like pixelated Smash Brothers game for NSO as like a bonus game if you're a member. Would be really cool. Yeah. And you gave me an idea for another wild card prediction just from saying pixelated Smash Brothers, and that is a release of a pack of NES Remix 1 and 2, but they have all brand new content. Tons of new mini games with those with that retro aesthetic. Those were phenomenal party games that we have not seen return. I would absolutely love to see those land back on the Switch. So I'm gonna go for a wild card bonus prediction of NES Remix 1 and 2. Maybe it's like a deluxe sort of thing where you get those.
Remix 3.
Yeah, or NES Remix 3. And they do like the deluxe thing and it includes all the mini games from 1 and 2. Who knows? But awesome. A new NES Remix.
I like it.
And I predict that they add some sort of a wonder mechanic into it where it gets like super like trippy, lucid with the pixel stuff.
That's a good idea.
But cool. Do you guys have any last predictions for us that you wanted to throw before we?
I think I'm tapped out for now.
Tapped out? Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, I think we covered everything. What a show. I had so much fun. Again, Andres, thank you so much for coming on. It's such a pleasure. I hope I can join you on the Andres Restart podcast again sometime soon because I always have a blast. Do you have anything in the works or anything you want to tell anyone about on the show that they can expect coming up? Or?
Well, I always got something in the works.
Of course he does.
Yeah. When's this going to be out?
This one's coming out Friday, so we're recording a little bit early. So I don't know if you have anything planned that far.
By the time whatever I tease, it might be out by then. Today's Tuesday, right? So
Today's Tuesday.
yeah. But I mean, if you've been paying attention to Nintendo news lately, probably have some sort of thing to say on that. But I try to dig a little deeper, right?
Sure.
Like, well, interestingly, I'll just point out something I did more recently that it's already been out there. So people this week have decided to start reporting on the Xenoblade X rumor from Zippo, right? I don't really think Zippo is a super reliable source, but he does provide some fun stuff to talk about. And it's interesting that they're talking about this now because info has been out for weeks already, right, since Christmas. But I made a video last week, right, where the rumor is mentioned, but it's more so kind of looking back at just like Xenoblade Chronicles X. I read through like the Iwata asks, like looking through history, read interviews, and just kind of like look at the possibility of Nintendo revisiting Xenoblade Chronicles X. It's like that, one of those last Wii U ports we really want to see. And so ultimately, I'm talking about the possibility of the Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. And so, yeah, it dig a little bit deeper on that one, and I really enjoyed making that video. So it's out there. You can check it out if you want.
I actually watched that video. It is fantastic, as well as all of Andres' content. So, guys, please, if you're not following this man, his content will be linked in the description box below. Go check him out. And don't forget to check out my co-host, who just joined YouTube with his own channel, Any Games Necessary. He has a Mario RPG review on his channel right now. Colin, do you have anything in the works that you want to mention that's coming?
Yeah, if all goes according to plan, by the time this episode releases, I'll have a top 10 most anticipated games of 2024 on my channel.
Nice.
My most anticipated.
Yeah, not yours. His.
Not anyone else's, because I'm sure people will disagree with me. But I'm here for it.
But that's the fun of it. We all have the things we like, you know?
I just like to fight with people on YouTube.
I know.
Some people like fighting. That's their pleasure. I like talking about games.
That's true. Same. But anyways, yeah, show Colin some love on Any Games Necessary. Help him start to build a community and get off to an awesome start on there. This is GameBird Weekly, our weekly podcast on my channel, GameBird Classic. If you guys aren't subscribed yet, hit that subscription button. Hit that like button. It really helps us out. And I'll see you all on the next GameBird Weekly. Peace.